はい、チャーリーさん。こんにちは。
こんにちは。
今日お元気ですか？
元気です。お元気
はい。
ですか？
元気ですよ。チャーリーさん、日本ですか？今。
今、
うん。
香
あ、
港に
今、
います。
香港帰ってきました。うん。
Feel like learning Japanese is too damn hard for you? Stop slaving away at grammar, words, and spelling. Now there's a better way to learn how to speak Japanese like a normal guy. Welcome to Terumi's podcast. Let's learn Japanese in just 2 months with Terumi's learning method.
So, チャーリーさん、welcome to my YouTube channel. How do you feel?
Thank you. Great. Happy to have completed level one. Doing my best to put what I learned into use, despite the fact that I'm in Hong Kong, which makes it a little more challenging. But I get back to Japan quite a bit, and I've been able to apply a lot of what I've learned.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Thank you so much. So listener can't understand what actually who you are. So can you actually explain like why you started learning Japanese or what do you do in general? Can you quickly explain?
Sure. Well, I used to live in California where I grew up, and I worked in a job that had me travel a lot for business. And I really fell in love with Japan. And I was going there quite frequently. I wound up marrying a Japanese wife, and eventually just picked up and moved to Japan. Um, but I would get tutors now and then, and I didn't really make a lot of progress. And my work just involved speaking English, so I never made a lot of progress really in my Japanese. So I was looking for a new way to study. That's how I found
Mm-hmm.
Japan Language Factory.
Thank you so much. So before you decided to live in Japan, like how many times you already have been to Japan or how long?
Well, let's see. That's a good question. I would go there on business once or twice a year. Uh, and then my wife and I started taking little trips in Japan before we got married. And then after we got married, we lived in separate countries for 5 years. So
Really?
I,
Oh.
yeah, so that meant I went to Japan as often as possible. Um, so before I moved there, I must have gone there 15 or 20 times.
Wow. People actually feel like, can I live there even if they like, right? So,
It is intimidating, yeah.
mhm. So what do you think, start coming to Japan since when you start feeling like, oh, I should learn language?
Well, I learned bits and pieces when I was visiting, like how to order a beer, how to
Mm,
ask what a bathroom was, basic
mm,
stuff like that. When I moved there,
mm-hmm.
uh, I started, and I was doing this in California before I moved, actually, but I started working with tutors to try to learn Japanese. Um, it just, and it was very slow and not very productive. So I would really learn just by kind of talking to other people and try to bumble through my daily life. Like I said, I never had to speak Japanese at work,
Mm,
so there was no pressure on me. But to get through daily life, you absolutely need to know some amount of Japanese. If you wanted to go to the grocery store and have somebody slice your fish for you, you've got to know some Japanese.
mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of places you can go in the world. English is the second language, which it is in Japan too, I guess. But everybody
Mm,
speaks it. So guys like us, some idiot from California who only speaks English can get by all right. But in Japan, it's much more difficult. So knowing some Japanese is absolutely critical.
yeah. And so you start learning, like you said, the progress was slow, and it's very normal. You start going to Japan, and the people start feeling like, oh, everybody speaks Japanese. I should like speak something much properly. And usually they find the maybe language application, or okay, I have to buy the textbook. That's actually a really normal step. But can you tell
Yeah.
me like a detail? What was the first step to learn Japanese?
I would engage a tutor. The tutor would say, "Here's your textbook. Open this up to page 10. Let's get started." And then there's lots of reading and writing, which, while important, was not my top priority because I'm not going to sit in an izakaya and write a note to somebody. Right?
Yeah.
That's not going to work. And it was all these sort of artificial lessons like, oh, this is Bob Smith is going to the office in Tokyo and has to talk about, the meeting that morning. I didn't care about that. I wanted to learn how to talk to normal people about everyday things, the situations that I was going to find myself in, which wasn't going to be being Bob Smith talking about the meeting. And eventually I'd just get frustrated and quit. And then I'd start again later, and the same thing would happen. It's like I must have gone through probably half a dozen tutors, and it always went the same.
Okay, so then what was it? This master course was like, how did you find us?
I don't remember exactly how I found you, but it was on the internet. And occasionally I would go looking for a new Japanese tutor or a new school or something to get into the Japanese language a little more thoroughly again. And I saw Japan Language Factory's ad and the approach, which was something that I always thought, which was, learn it like a baby. Babies learn how to talk, and they're not going through textbooks, and yet they can speak better than I can. So I wanted to explore that approach, and that's how I got involved with JLF.
Thank you so much for finding us. A lot of people actually feel like, I'm not baby anymore. How can I learn the language like a baby? I'm old. People actually really doubt their potential. Like, oh, I'm old already brain. It's not working, and that's why they need to study with a textbook. But it's not like that. And you actually really made a lot of progress also. So how was that experience?
It was great. You're right. I'm not a baby anymore, believe it or not. And I work, and I don't have time to sit down and do homework every night and study during the day. If I'd started learning when I was in school, maybe that would have been the case, and that would have been fine. But once I got online on a Zoom call with my tutor, and we just started, picking a subject, and well, let's talk about this subject. Here are the things that you should be able to say. And it's like a kid learns, right? The teacher would say, oh, say a sentence. And then like, oh, I see what that means. I can use that. I'll write it down. I'll memorize it. I'll say it a few times, and I'll ease it into conversation somewhere. I think that's what little kids do.
And
exactly. You've talked about this quite extensively, and it just makes sense. 2-year-olds don't learn how to speak. 3-year-olds don't learn how to speak from working through textbooks. So there must be a more efficient way to do
it. Exactly. Whenever people want to learn the language, everybody starts buying a textbook, and they start from alphabet, a word, and also like some example sentences. But here, yes, like you came to our school from the first day, you start speaking something already. It's totally different approach. What do you think about the differences?
Well, I think it's the difference between starting from reading and writing and trying to put that into verbal language versus starting with verbal language and not really worrying about reading and writing until it's necessary. That's the difference. And if you're trying to learn how to speak from a textbook, you're going to sound like a textbook, and use words and sentence structure that normal people don't use in their everyday conversation. You're going to sound like a robot or some foreigner who doesn't know how to talk. Whereas if you're just dealing with a native speaker, which is what I was doing, learning how to say things the way ordinary people say them and knowing what they mean, then and you can build on that. Obviously, the more words you learn or the more sentence structures you pick up, but it's just a more organic way to work through the process, I think. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, people want to learn a language so they can speak the language, not so they can, you know, read the language.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing wrong with reading. I like reading, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, you don't just meet people and crack open a book and start reading it to them. So
Mm-hmm.
I really preferred the verbally focused approach quite a bit.
Yeah. Amazing. So do you usually speak with other, you have a child, so you usually talk with other parents or in like a random people in izakaya? Like how do you usually meet people and talk in general?
Uh, Often through business meetings in Japan.
Mm.
I have some friends in Japan. Yeah, sometimes I meet people in izakaya or a bar or just
Mm.
on the street or something. And I think Japanese people feel more comfortable striking up a conversation with a strange foreigner rather than a strange Japanese person. So it happens a lot.
Hmm. Do you see some differences with the Japanese people?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I did make it a point to learn how to introduce myself and begin a meeting in Japanese, and people really seem to appreciate it.
All right, so Charlie-san, so lastly, like, do you have any message to the people who maybe can't start learning Japanese because maybe they feel like it's impossible to learn, even they live in Japan? You said you're not baby anymore, but people actually also doubt, like, I'm too old to start or something. What do you think? The age doesn't matter or not? I actually started learning English when I was 30, so I didn't start from baby, but yeah.
I think if you don't start now, you'll either start when you're even older or you'll never start. So,
Mm.
you know, you're not going to have your first lesson and walk out fluent in Japanese, but if you walk out and you can say a couple of things, you're started already, and you just learn more. So I would say, if you really want to live in Japan and not be viewed as somebody who's only there temporary and then going home, you should learn how to have some conversation in Japanese, and it's better to start now than later.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Are you expat living in Japan? You started living in Japan, you're super excited to communicate with locals. You can enjoy traveling, meeting people. And now you start using this textbook and you feel like, wow, that's so many. Elementary school textbook, another elementary school textbook, and how many hours should you study? Let's think one more time. In order to communicate like a normal guy, you can do everything in the basic everyday life. Should you finish all those textbooks? Otherwise, you won't understand what they're talking. You cannot express yourself, anything. First of all, there are always two ways to learn languages. One is documentational language, the other one is conversational language. It's like, once upon a time, grandmother and grandfather are living somewhere. Or, hey, what's up? How's it going? Which is conversational. What is the most effective way to learn how to speak Japanese? Textbooks can't talk to you, so you cannot improve your listening skill and pronunciation, how to communicate. So why Japanese children can speak Japanese so quickly? Because they are learning conversational Japanese. The good news is, in Japan Language Factory, we have a specific learning structure to improve your conversational Japanese. So you can join the conversation, you can understand what they're talking, you can respond quickly, and express what you are thinking. If you want to be able to speak Japanese as soon as possible, join our free consultation to figure out what is the fastest way to start speaking Japanese.